All right, Bob, how you doing this morning?
Doing real well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm excited about this conversation. As I was digging into your background, there was something in there that really caught my attention because I know my journey to where I'm at now has been a really interesting, wild ride that I never predicted I would end up at. So, how does one go from starting out selling hot dogs and cotton candy to becoming to becoming a spiritual meditation guru and master?
So let me say it this way, that the facts of the journey, the actual details of, how I went from point A to point B are unique. I've never heard of anyone who has a story quite like mine, but the motivation or the reasons why of the journey, the reasons of the transformation are as common as anyone. I think that we all get to places in our lives where, we start to hit bottom and we're looking for something else. There's a sense that we're missing something, and we're looking and we're searching. And for those of us that, have some serendipity, something comes along that we grab onto. So that part of my story is pretty normal. But again, the details are a bit unique.
I want to dive into these details though, because like I mentioned, my journey to where I'm at, every bit of that is unique. Everything that I've been doing since I made that transition in life is like blazing my own trail. It's been very unique in the sense that there's no reference points.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that sometimes that's like the scariest part of undertaking one of these journeys when you can't find something to kind of model or at least help get you started. Did you encounter any of that, or was it just kind of like, well, this is what it is? I woke up one day and here I am. Let's go.
Yeah. I think it was a combination of just what I'll call serendipitous, just unusual things that came into my life at the right time that turned my path. So my folks were Eastern European immigrants, and my dad was Hungarian royalty, and the Bolsheviks wiped out all of my ancestors on his side. My mom was Roma Gypsy, and anything about the Romas, everybody wiped them out. So they came to a conclusion that there really couldn't be any kind of God that would allow those things to happen. So the family that I grew up in was, I'm not going to say atheist, because there was no anti or againstness of it. It was more like non-theist. It was just not a conversation that we had. So I didn't really grow up with any kind of religious training. Although here's the thing, is my dad, who was Hungarian, and he talked like Dracula, I want to suck your blood, and he said to me, we are Americans and you must learn the Bible stories. So wherever we traveled to, and we did travel with Carnival selling cotton candy and popcorn and the like, that was what my father discovered was his path to the American dream, was popcorn. And he would have me go to children's Sunday schools, even though we'd never go to service, never, studied the Bible or anything else, but he wanted me to learn the Bible stories. So I would go and I would learn these stories, and they were odd to me, and if you don't grow up with a belief in something supernatural or something that you can't see and touch, then the stories are a bit odd. Noah's Ark and the Garden of Eden and the like. But everywhere I went, they kept telling me that there was this person, this Jesus Christ, who I did not quite understand, but that this person loved me. And I didn't know where he was, somewhere off in the cosmos, but that there was this creature out there in the cosmos that loved me. So that's a piece of it. All right. That's something that I accepted. And during the hard parts of my life and during the difficult times, and I was kind of a fat young man. I guess in my day and age of the 50s and 60s, we called it husky. I was a husky, and J.C. Penney's had their husky department, and that's where I would go and get my clothes. So I was bullied a bit, and what got me through that was this idea that somebody loved me. My folks were, Eastern European, and they weren't very affectionate. They were more concerned that a job gets done right than lavishing praise. But there was always this love that someone had for me. So that's one factor. I was a big guy, and I found that football was something that I could use my size for. So I became a football player and went to Boston University, flunked out. What do you do when you're in the 60s, 68, 69, and you flunk out of college? You become a hippie, right? I mean, that's what you do. And
That's the natural progression.
The natural progression. And so I was living in a hippy dippy apartment, and it was one of those places where you never knew who was going to be in that apartment on any particular night, or if I may say so, even who would be with who. And there was this one fellow, we used to argue all the time about Nixon and Vietnam and Cambodia. And there was this fellow named John Berman, and he told me that I should be a lawyer because he said I was a really good arguer. So one day, John disappears, and he comes back a couple of weeks later, and he has a check, a postal money order made out for $350, which was the fee to take the law school aptitude test. And it was a postal money order, so it was made out to the Educational Testing Service, so I couldn't cash it. And he goes, "You should be a lawyer, go take the test." And I did, and I did good enough, and one law school decided they'd take a chance on me, so that's how I got to be a lawyer. And then things happened. I was in the DA's office with Janet Reno, who I'm sure that a lot of your listeners might be a little too young to know who she was, but she was, if you have ever heard of, she was the Attorney General in the Clinton administration, and I worked for her. And while I worked for her, I was in the Consumer Frauds Department, and we hit the mob for a lot of money. And I left the office a little after that, and then here's the next surreptitious thing. So the mobster, I'll call him Johnny, the guy we hit up for like 72 million, comes to see me, and he says, "You're pretty good to hit us for that much money, and we'd like to hire you." So now all of a sudden I'm with that group of people. Oh, and I should mention one other thing that I think is important. So John, this fellow who bought me the ticket, he was a heroin addict, and we had pulled him out of shooting galleries in Harlem several times. But when I got accepted to law school, he went clean. And he went to community college, and he was going to become a PI, a private investigator. And we had all these dreams about I was going to be the lawyer, and he was going to be the private investigator, and we're going to do all this cool stuff. And he stayed with me and supported me and was my right arm until 3 days after I was sworn in, got a job in the DA's office, and he met some chick who convinced him to shoot up, and he had forgotten that his tolerance had gone down, and he overdosed. And so I've always thought that my being a lawyer had some real special meaning to it. So going fast forward again, I met these guys, and I'm hanging out with them, and I'm doing maybe putting a little stuff up my nose that I shouldn't have been putting up my nose, and going out to these chrome and glass discotheques and hanging out with these guys. And I really didn't have a North Star. I didn't come up in any kind of spiritual background. And so I was flip-flopping around. Things were going south. Family was breaking apart. And I was seeing a therapist. And I came to a real important crossroads in my life. And I asked this guy, you know, what should I do? What should I do? And he says to me, I'll tell you. And he picks up some coins and he starts throwing the coins and dropping them on the table and making mathematical calculations and drawing little lines. And I'm thinking I'm paying this guy $65 an hour to throw coins, and this is nuts. And he comes up with a number, and he opens up a book to that chapter number and shows me the name of the chapter, and the name of the chapter is Retreat. And so I curse him out. This is crazy. You're making a decision about my life here, the coins.
Right.
And I stomp out, but it was the right advice. So I went to this business that I was trying to start that was draining me dry. And I walked in and I said, it's over, it's closed. And I picked myself up and I stopped going down the rabbit hole. And I went back to see George and I said to him, what was that? And he said, that was the I Ching, the classical book of changes. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, it's Taoist. And I say, what's that? Turns out that my therapist was the English language editor for Master Wat Ching Ni, who was a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple, you know, Kung Fu, Tai Chi, all that stuff. And I started asking him about Taoism, and all of a sudden he showed me this thing, which was kind of like an owner's manual for how to live life, but it didn't ask me to believe in anything that I couldn't believe in, that I wasn't ready to believe in. And I took to it like a fish out of water. So that's another one of those serendipitous things that happened in my life. And I studied under Master Ni for 8 years. And then I had a little run-in with my client and had to leave Miami. So I wound up going to North Carolina, and I met my wife there. And she is a Southern Baptist Bible literalist. So here you got this Taoist, Buddhist, non-theist who is meeting this Bible literalist, who both of us were, well, I had been transformed. My life at that point was all about public service. And so I was representing indigent folks and doing a lot of pro bono work. And I got to say, Miami was very, very good to me, and I was able to afford. I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't able to afford to follow my heart. So that, you know, again, one of those serendipitous things that I was able to do what I wanted to do because I could afford to do it. And she's a saint, and we met and we really fell in love with each other because of our shared values. But it was a little bit hard to talk about our cosmologies. So that's how my book came about. So,
see, there's a lot of beautiful parallels that I can see within your story, within the journey and the progression that I've experienced, because I went through a lot of that same, almost not being conscious of exactly where I was going and looking for, you know, what's next? What am I doing? For me personally, that transition moment came sitting in my truck, looking in the rearview mirror, realizing I didn't have anywhere to call home outside of the four wheels and the body of that truck, and, you know, stumbling along for a long time, and just kind of realizing, hey, I've got to become open. I got to become willing to accept whatever it is the universe is pushing my way, and willing to explore it. And actually, you kind of dove in a little bit and touched on one of the questions I was really intrigued to get your response to about how you discovered the meditative part of your practices. For me personally, it was a talk therapy session that, meditation was brought up, and I basically kind of shoved it off as like no big deal, whatever, not my thing. Then I went out back and I picked up my crossbow and I started shooting, and I'm like, this is, realizing that this is everything that was just shared with me for the past hour. Let me run off and really try to embrace it. And then when I realized I'm not comfortable doing this at home, let me go out and find the safest place that I know of, being the wilderness, and comfortable, safe place, calling places like this at the beach. And through that, it began to just expand, and you become open, you become receptive to all those different little seeds that are laid in front of you that otherwise you would miss. And the part where you mentioned about meeting your wife, I've recently, within the last year, experienced the same sort of thing, where you just meet that person that seems to complete the chapter. As much as people come in and out of our story with their little nuggets of wisdom they're supposed to teach us, and they help to refine our vision enough to discover the purpose and the direction that we're here to be and that we need to pursue. And that obviously, in one way or another, we find those hiccups that where we can't communicate in a way somebody's going to understand. So we have to dive in, we have to explore it. And that really, I think, opens up an avenue to talk more in depth about your book, because, setting that up that way, it really helps in the end to help us to find the vocabulary we use, but also to be able to convey that so that together we can come around a fire and we can actually help each other. And that is one of the most important fundamentals of really any community, any journey, whether it's personal or taken as a group.
You're so right. I thought that her belief system was unbelievable, and she thought that my belief system was just weird and just out there and weird. I remember one time she's going off to church, and it was Sunday, and I was sitting at home about to watch the news programs, and she had this sad beagle eye look in her face, and I asked her what was wrong. And she said to me, well, honey, I just love you so much, but I hate it that you're not going to go to heaven with me, because I hadn't been saved in her system, in her belief system. And I said to her, well, I hate it that you're not going to be reincarnated with me, upon which time she slapped me. And that was kind of like, how things were. But, in Taoism, the main seminal book of Taoism is called the Tao Te Ching, which means, the Ching means a classical book, and the Tao means the way, and Te means virtue. So the Tao Te Ching is the classical book of the way of virtue. And it's 81 short, pithy, one-page chapters that contains, most of the wisdom of Taoism. There's a funny legend, about Lao Tzu and how it got written and the like, but she would come home from church, and I was just curious about, what church was like, and, what did the preacher say, and what was the sermon like. And she would tell it to me, and I would think, wow, that lesson, once you got away from kind of the dogma and the my way or the highway, and, nobody gets to the Father except through me kind of stuff. Once you get away from that and you look at the teachings, what was taught, it's almost as if Jesus came to his teachings like it's like Jesus 2.0. It's like a new operating system for living. Everybody was thinking about an eye for an eye and vengeance and there was just a whole culture. And then he came and said things like, well, you've heard it said this thing, but I say this, and John comes to him and says, do I have to, forgive this guy 7 times, which was the Jewish culture? And he said, no, you got to do it 7 times 70. And I'm thinking, wow, that story reminds me of chapter 31 of the Tao Te Ching. So I started listening more and looking more. And then I started going the other way. Like I started saying, well, this is what being said in the Tao Te Ching. What does the Bible say about that? And the more I looked and the more I researched, the more I found out that once you take the dogma out, once you take the institutionalized religion out of it, there ain't a hair's breadth of difference in the teachings. The teachings are all the same. So I started taking passages from the Tao Te Ching and putting them in Christian language. For example, Lao Tzu says, for example, about leadership. He says, you should be called to leadership, regretfully and disgruntledly. In other words, you should resist being called to leadership. But if you are called, then you should step up. And then when your work is done, you should step down. And that way, your work is the subject of admiration, not you. You're terminal, you're ephemeral, your work can maintain. So if you put that in Christian terms, you can think about Jesus having come, given his teachings, and then ascending when his work was done. So you can see this similarity in stories. So I started to do that and share it with her. And the more I shared it with her, the more we were able to have deep conversations, and we came together into kind of a unified belief. And it was really important to our marriage. And it's always been really good. But to answer your question about how I got into meditation, so Taoism is much more contemplative than meditative. Taoism, you think of things like Kung Fu and Tai Chi and Qigong and the motion of energy and yin and yang and moving forward, moving backwards, learning to go with the flow, that kind of thing. But when I got to North Carolina, there's not a lot of Taoists here, I promise you, in North Carolina, but there are Buddhists. So I started attending, Buddhist places, and Buddhism is into meditation. So I started asking, what's this meditation thing and the like. And frankly and honestly, there were years of fits and starts. Like I would start and I would do it for a while, and then I'd not do it for a while. And so it was kind of like that. I'd learn a little bit more, I'd get a little bit better, then I'd get away from it. But then I got a coach. And I think that made all the difference, because I think there's nothing like a coach. You can go to books and you can go to apps and you can do a lot of stuff, but there's nothing like a coach. And so I got a coach, and from that moment on, I developed a consistent practice. I still sit every morning for 30 minutes, and it's made a huge difference. And teaching it is, I get my life from teaching it, from seeing the change that occurs when people realize, most people think that meditation is about quieting the mind or emptying the mind, and then they get frustrated when they can't do it. But you can't do it. That's not what it's about. It's about watching the mind. It's about actually stepping back and realizing that I am not my thoughts. And I always ask, well, if you're not your thoughts, then who are you? Because, even you say, I had a thought. Well, who is it that's the I that had the thought? And when you start to introduce people to whatever it is that you want to call that ego state that is the creator of your thoughts, You might want to call it your subconscious or your true self, or, if you're religious, your soul, your connection, however you want to call it. We generally may have the neutral term, the observer. When you step into that state of being the observer and can actually watch your thoughts, all of a sudden you come to this point where you get this aha moment where you go, excuse my language, but you go, I can't believe I've let this bullshit control my life all these years. and when that happens, I jump for joy. I just love it when I see a student get that. And all of a sudden, oh, I have something to say about the matter of my own life. Wow, isn't that cool?
Those are the beautiful moments.
It's a
I
beautiful
encounter
moment.
a lot of those too when I'm
Uh-huh.
out on the trail with a group. You take them out and we start doing the hiking process first, which I introduce a lot of walking meditation in there, because a lot of the time I have found that when you're trying to introduce somebody to meditation, whether it's you that brings up the conversation or they approach you, it's that idea of, I'll never slow my thoughts down. I can never do this. And you get out there and you start physically actually moving and walking, and you start introducing the idea of focusing in on the movements and the processes, the breathing and everything, as well as the tranquility of the scenery around you. Then you hit a point and you sit down and actually walk them through a meditation. And by the time you get to that point, their body has got them so relaxed that, this, and sitting down is so enjoyable that all of a sudden the thought process slows down for them. And then you walk them through some breathing exercises, get them to contemplate a little bit. And then when at the end, when you're getting ready to get back up and pick up the next leg of the hike, they look at you and they go, man, I really let all this craziness just control what I'm doing. And I never thought about the fact that I actually had within me this ability to control these racing thoughts, let alone slow it down to examine and realize I can make a conscious decision about where I go, where that next footstep ends up being put.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I confess to really envying your ability to do that. I teach mostly online. I think as well as I know that meditation's a pretty hard conversation in our culture. Everybody wants it, but nobody wants to do the discipline of the practice. It's like everybody wants a jog, but to get out there and actually jog every day and build it up, is not something that is very Western. So it's a hard conversation. And so I don't have enough folks in my community to have in-person classes. So most of the stuff I do is online. And to be out there like you do, in nature, and also to work with the body to allow that relaxation of mind. I really get it. And I'm envious of you. I think that's just so cool.
It's crazy because it's something that I never actually anticipated, doing. Because I too started out obviously with the podcast, and it was totally a digital feel that I had, and that was where my fingerprint was. But then, a few months back, some things came up, and I found myself thrusted into a position where I had to transition. And I realized, as much as I enjoy the online aspect of it, but I also enjoy the physical in-person feel of being out in nature. It is a difficult wall to climb when you're doing things digitally with meditation. There's only so far that you can reach. When you get in person in front of somebody and you walk them through it, there's that actual physical connection. Yes, you still get to employ the storytelling aspect of your journey and then whatever other synonyms and aspects that you add into there to craft your direction. But to physically get out there and see that response or that engagement, it's something that I never truly was able to wrap my mind around how much I would appreciate it before the
Mhm.
first time I got together with a group and I took them on a hike, which, it just so happened to be a bunch of people that were going through the recovery journey. I just randomly sent out a bunch of emails to different facilities and like, hey, this is what I do. This is a great idea. It might help your community. And I got together, I took 6 or 8 people from this group out, and the impact was just, it was mind blowing. You
Mhm.
know, we all sit around a room, we share our story, but when we get out there and we physically do different activities, and another thing that I really, really incorporate is a lot of teaching the wilderness skill set, different survival skills and stuff. Because along the way for me, when I hit that transition point, I was really, for a lack of a better term, I was really broken. I had no self worth, no self value. And when I thought about how to rebuild that, it was through these different skill sets. Because
Mhm.
at that point, I had found myself homeless. Before that transition, being a sportsman, I had the gear, I had the skills to keep myself alive. And I kind of put my vision in on that, and that was what fueled the ability to rediscover the self-worth and self-value in a way that, for me, regardless of what somebody says, regardless of what somebody does, they can't take that away from me, because you can do or you can say anything. However, in a situation where it's needed, I can start a fire to keep you warm, to boil some water. I can harvest something to eat. I can do this, I can do that, build a shelter. And I started teaching all these people that come out in the field with me those very skills. And as I presented it in that aspect, it becomes more than just, oh, let me gather some twigs and start a fire, or let me find some logs and build a shelter to get out of the rain. It was more like, if I can do this in the wilderness where at times things can be pretty jeopardy, then when I come back into the real world and I've got to face, whatever stress is involved, I can craft a way around it. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say, what the outcome is. I got that skill set. I've got that confidence, and I
Yeah.
can, what's the word for it? I can employ that no matter, or I can craft that and pivot that into whatever shape the situation or the environment requires.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's like the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy, the sense of I can do this. I remember, my son. I don't want to embarrass him, but he was engaged in his uh, third freshman year. Let me put it to you that way. And he was at Miami-Dade Community College, and I found that there was I went back to school after being a lawyer for many years. I went back to school and got a master's in social work. That's where my transformation led me to, because I wanted to work with my clients more holistically. I guess what I didn't like about my work is that I would work with somebody's legal problems, and then they would get through it, and then they would go through the door, and then they'd be back again. And I wanted to see what I could do about helping them go stop that revolving door. So I went back and I got my master's in social work. But I tell you that just to tell you that I found this program that was a 5-year bachelor's, master's in social work program. And I suggested to him that maybe he would like to do that. So we went down to Miami, went to Barry University, and he went in and talked to the dean. And then, we took a little tour of the campus. But I'll never forget this moment. He came back out of his last discussion with some of the faculty, and he stepped out of the building, and we were in the quad, and he looked around, And he said to me, literally said to me, I can do this. I get a little joke, but he said, I can do this. And from that moment on, there was no stopping him. And now he's a licensed clinical social worker, and he does his therapy, and he's helping people, and it's that sense of I can do this. And I think that when you help folks learn, that they can survive, that they can deal with this, that they can take care of themselves in that regard, whether it's the same thing in the detail or not, the feeling of I can do this, I can survive, it carries over into the real world. And that, to me, is a much more important internal sense than self-esteem, whatever that is. And I think self-esteem fluctuates and goes up and down based on your comparison to other people. But that sense of I can do this. And I think that, making a fire, finding something to eat, boiling water, it's beautiful. I have I have a friend who teaches yoga, and part of the 300 and 500 hour training is a meditation leg. And she always asked me to come in and do the meditation portion. What was I going to say? So, where was I going with that? I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll pick it up for you because
Okay.
you
Yeah.
started that with my favorite words to hear. I can do it. I can do this.
I can do this.
The position that we hold within a community, as far as trying to be supported, trying to teach and help people grow. Those are the most satisfying work. That is actually the most satisfying payment that we can receive. Is the response of I can do this, and being able to direct that, whether it's through conversations like these or different subject matter, the harder conversations, or it's through the physical aspect of doing a task. You learn so much, and you're able to absorb all those different teachings of the process, that you get the resilience to, when those words I can do this finally bubble up to the surface, they are so heartfully meant and fulfilling to the person that's speaking them, that really it's not just a launching point or a baby step along their journey, but they're crafting and they're blazing their very own path based on the motivation through the work that they do with a mentor, a guide, or a friend, another family member, whoever the case may be. And these are the things that I feel like in today's world we get away from.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in the rat race and that almost army ant mentality, as I call it, where it's just simply let's put our nose to the grindstone, complete one task while we're working on another task, and hope that they both come together with some quality. But in a sense, what we're doing is we're showing you that it's safe and that it's okay to slow down. And when you slow down, it bridges that gap to where I can do this bubbles up in that heartfelt, meaningful sort of context. And when they say it, man, it brings to this day, it brings goosebumps.
Yeah, it's like the old Zen saying that says, you should meditate for 15 minutes a day unless you don't have time to meditate for 15 minutes a day. Then you should meditate for an hour a day. Because you just don't get it that you do have the 15 minutes. But I remember what I was going to say is that we often talk about, she and I, about the yoga, and we both are doing the same thing. We just do it in different directions. That meditation starts with your mind. And then once you develop some mind skills, it goes to the body with body scans and sensations and body sensations and the like, and then eventually gets to the observer or the soul. I sometimes feel a little apologetic saying it about the soul, but after you meditate for a long enough time, you just feel that there is something that is very special and something that's very spiritual and something that's very connected to this observer person, this observer that we are. And you even sense that many of the thoughts that, we don't know where our thoughts come from. They just come out of the void and they kind of are present. They manifest for a little bit and then they go away. And so where do they come from? And I sometimes start thinking that they come from out there and not from in here. But there's I don't know. I don't want to get, too wrapped up in the spiritual end of it. But the meditation goes from our mind to our body and then to our observer or to that deeper self, our true self. Whereas in yoga, it starts with the body, but then goes to the mind and then goes again to that observer or deeper self. And what you're doing is you're taking both of those things. You're going from the mind and the body together. One goes to the other and one goes to the other, and then it goes to the interior. And that's just beautiful.
It completes that full circle, the getting back to the old Native American spirituality, which is the medicine wheel. It's a complete circle for a reason. And a lot of the times when I get asked all the time about it is, why a circle? Well, in reality, the sun, where we get our substance for life, is a circle. And the earth is a circle. Then you think about what lives on the earth, outside of us, the plants, the animals, they rely on the sun in order to be nurtured, to grow, and to live and do their thing. Now we rely on everything else everything within that circle. We rely on the plants and the animals, the water, the sun. And when you bring balance to that, it's, no matter the context that you put it in, whether it's a Christian context, it's an atheist context, it's looking at examples throughout history of people that have come before us, Marcus Aurelius, different philosophies, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, people that founded this country. It's all within one. They all learned how to work within balance, and they had to take the time to train themselves and discover their strengths as well as their weaknesses, and not shy away or fear from either side. They didn't get too caught up in the ego aspect of their strengths, but they didn't get caught up in the fear of the shortcuts. They were willing to sit down with themselves, have these conversations. And, toward the end of the Indian Wars, when, Crazy Horse and his people were going through before they finally surrendered, there was a lot of that going on within Crazy Horse, throughout his entire journey. Every time something would come up where he was conflicted, it was time to retreat and sit with himself in order to flex that muscle, do the reps in order to strengthen his understanding of himself and the direction that not only him, but being the leader that his people needed to go. And a lot of the time, that involves that sacrifice, that without putting that time into building that resolve within, you just don't have the courage to do.
Yeah. Just, for your list, I'm sure what the Tai Chi signifies, but just, for your listeners, the Tai Chi, that circular thing with the white and the black and the dots of the opposite in each of them. So again, just for your listeners, the black is the yin and the white is the yang, and the masculine and the feminine, but in each one of them lays the seed of the other. So inside of the white Tai Chi is the seed of yin, inside of yin is the seed of yang, inside of yang is the seed of yin, which means that eventually that seed will grow and take over so that the young yin becomes an old yin and then becomes a young yang. And this is just a symbol of the fact that the entire universe is circular, and that day turns to night and night turns to day, and winter turns to summer and summer turns to winter. But here's the thing that most people miss and is so life enriching, is that not only is the physical universe cyclical, but even good times turn to bad times, and bad times turn to good times. And the proof of that is that it always has. Whenever we've been in bad times, they've always gotten better. And whenever we've been in good times, they've always gotten worse. And so what that cycle teaches us is that when things are going really well, this is not the time to sit on your laurels and coast, because things are going to go down. And so you want to, like a chipmunk, store up your nuts for the winter. And then when things are going really bad, don't lose hope, because all of our lives, it's taught us that things are going to get better. And once we can accept that circular pattern, that things get better and things get worse, just like that tide that's behind you. Now, if I was out in the ocean and I wanted to get into the shore, sometimes the water's going to be going with me, and sometimes it's going to be going against me. So if I'm smart, I'm not going to swim constantly all the time. When the water's going with me, I'm going to swim like hell. But then when it goes against me, I'm going to conserve my energy and just hold my position and wait until the time changes and it's going with me again. And then I'm going to swim like hell again, having saved my energy up. So that's kind of like how the Taoism teaches us to go with the flow in life, because you've probably noticed that there are times when like nobody's listening to you, right? You're talking and like nobody listens, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's like the tide is against you. So it's stupid to keep trying to force people to listen to you then. Better to just shut up and start thinking about, what am I going to say when people turn to me and say, what do you have to say? When the times change and now you have the time to be heard, now you want to be ready to be heard. So you want to use that time of waiting to prepare for that time. And that's what, that's what the I Ching, the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching, they teach us all of these different times in life and how to learn to go with the flow in a profound, and conscious and intentional way. And those teachings are really good, because they tell us that life can really be easy. I mean, it's not, you can't just sit in an inner tube and go down the river, because you're going to run into rocks and run ashore. You got to do some guidance, and
Right.
some steering here, little adjustments, but it's better than paddling upstream.
Honestly, when you think about the fact that all of us enjoy the good times, none of us want the bad times.
Right.
But, we have to have one in order to appreciate the other. That brings balance. You can't have day without night. You can't have life without death, because how are you going to appreciate the good stuff? But during that time, it brings, it really makes me think about the story and the journey of the wolf, because we all, we sit there and
feeding the wolf.
no, actually the journey, the story of the progression of the wolf as he mastered his craft. We all think he's just an amazing killer, a bloodthirsty killer, because he loves to kill. The truth is, he actually took the time to really hone his skills, because in his world, that abundance and that famine, the win and the loss, there is no greater price between each other. When you lose for him, that means he starves. But when he's got something and he gets his prey, he's got time to hone that skill and practice. And that's something that if we look at and we take the time to actually understand, hey, when we're in these good, in this good period of abundance, we can practice these different skill sets so that when we're in the famine session, we can still get through. You know, we're still going to have the ability to reach the confidence to lay back on our skill set, on our
Yeah, yeah.
strengths.
Yeah.
And
And we also have to be aware of the dangers of the good times.
right,
They bring on that arrogance and the hunger for power, and the other things that cause us to lose our way. By the way, that's why the name of my book is I Am the Way, because that's what Jesus said, and that's what the Tao means, is the way. And I often wonder whether when Jesus was saying I am the way, he was referring to the Tao. But
see,
yeah,
I love that part of it because you know if we remove the titles, it's all the same. You know, you could pick up, for instance, the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and you can
mhm.
find so many things that correlate with not only Buddhist teachings but also Christianity and every other religion out there. You look at Native American spirituality, all the same thing. It's just worded completely different. And if
Mhm.
we took all that biasness and the titles away, you know how much further we could advance and
Uh,
how
uh,
quick that would happen.
uh, it's almost unimaginable.
Exactly. So as we come to the end of our time today, though, I got this question I'll let you warmed up. I love to hit everybody with. From your path and from your journey, you got to leave us with some inspiration that's going to help us to remove those labels and those stigmas and find the progress.
Yeah. So it's two things. One is that you are not your thoughts. You're not your thoughts. You have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. And the other one is that we are so much greater. We are so much larger than we have any idea when we're stuck in our small egos, full of the fears and anxieties and vulnerabilities and the like, that when we have that tiny little bit of courage that's necessary to drop the shield, to drop the mask, and just be revealed for who we are, we actually become invulnerable then. And it is a goal that's worth pursuing.
I want to go back to the very beginning of that because what you said, I think, is probably some of the simplest yet most fundamental and valuable advice that could have been shared is the fact that you're not your thoughts. I want to build on that because you're not your thoughts, you're not your coping mechanisms for right now. Those things are simply what you're latching onto because it's what you know. You know,
Conditioning.
exactly. It is not something that is you. You know, it's not the label. You can remove all of those things if you're willing to take the time to take the journey.
It is the
Willingness,
you, it's the you that the world gave you.
right? You
And
know,
it doesn't have to be the you that you choose to be.
we all have that decision to make.
Mhm.
And if you feel like you're stuck within that label and it's overpowering, give yourself a minute. You know, I'm sitting here in Michigan right now, and the saying is if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes because it's going to change, right? Well, if you're stuck in a moment and you don't like where you're at, wait a minute because those thoughts are going to blow away.
Mhm.
They're going to change. They
Mhm.
come and they go. Now, before we wrap this up, though, you have to let people know where they can get in touch with you, what you got coming up, and all those good things.
Okay, so I have written an ebook that's free. And if anybody's interested in meditation, it's called What is Meditation? it's called Is Meditation for Me? What it is, what it's not, and how to do it. And it's free, and I'm happy to share it with folks. And it's got a lot of like fun and inspirational little memes in it, and some really good explanations. And you can get it by going to my website, which is awiseandhappylife.com. And
Bob,
contact
you
me.
did it again. You did it again. You shared something that was so fundamental without even thinking about it. As serious as these conversations can get, the overall theme throughout a journey, because they're difficult, is you got to have fun with it. You got to enjoy it.
You got to enjoy it.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. It's been a great conversation. I'm really, really grateful that you took the time to do this. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you for the work you do. And I want to tell you one more thing. I'm in Costa Rica right now, and it's the rainy season, and sitting on my front porch, I'm overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And between here and the Pacific Ocean is a huge forest and jungle, and it's all verdant green and beautiful. And, you know, when I sit out on the porch in the morning and have a cup of coffee, I look out there and I go, wow, I am so blessed that I have even this little time to be there. And I think of what you do, and I just have to say how blessed you are to be able to make a difference in people's lives inside of that world of nature. And I can just feel my heart beating.
I appreciate that, you know, getting together like this and celebrating, because I find your work absolutely amazing. So being able to celebrate not only our journeys, but our work together has been a privilege. And I look forward to getting together to do it again sometime soon.
I'd love to do that. I would love to do that. Okay.